I went to a Christian camp in Pennsylvania when I was 14. It was more rustic than I expected. Tents instead of cabins. Outhouses. A massive cornfield nearby. The camp leaders used it as a sermon prop, comparing it to fields of faith. But by the third night, no one saw it that way anymore. It began with the scratching. Soft at first. Around 2 a.m., something scraped along the outside of our tent. It was rhythmic. Deliberate. We laughed it off the first night. Raccoons, maybe. But by the second night, the scratches became louder. Angrier. Our tent walls trembled. My friend Aaron zipped the tent open and shined a flashlight out. We saw nothing. But when we looked down in the morning, the dirt had drag marks. Something big had circled the tent. By the third night, the scratching stopped. That should have been a relief. But it wasn't. Because that night, we heard breathing. Not ours. Something heavy. Close. It came from above. The tent rippled. Then it tore. A clean vertical slash, as though someone took a razor from top to bottom. We screamed. Counselors ran over and blamed it on a prank. But in the grass around our tent, there were footprints. Long, bare footprints. With 3 toes. The next day, one of the boys from another tent wandered into the cornfield alone. We found him hours later, standing in the middle of the field, unblinking. His arms were scratched raw, and he'd carved the word kneel into his skin with his fingernails. Camp ended early. They said it was a mental health concern. But no one explained the claw marks. A year later, someone posted drone footage of the area. You had to look closely, but just as the camera pans past the corn, there's a figure standing perfectly still. Tall. Dark. Faceless. And just behind it, scratched into the dirt, "See you next summer." There's an island camp in upstate New York. They call it Whispering Pines, and you won't find it on Google Maps. It takes a ferry to get there. No cell towers, no emergency services. Every returning camper knows the legend, Johnny No Face. Supposedly, he was a boy who got lost in the forest in the 1970s. Some say he fell into a fire and his face melted. Others claim he wandered too far and came back, different. I was a junior counselor when I saw the footage. 2 counselors stayed behind during a nighttime scavenger hunt. One had a camera to film a prank. But the camera caught something else, a pale, human-like shape crawling between the trees. No facial features. No eyes. Just stretched skin and a lipless mouth. They followed it until it stopped and sat back on its haunches. Then it turned toward them. Even through the grainy lens, you could feel the dread. The footage cuts out. That night, 2 campers were found deep in the woods. Clothes torn, hands covered in dirt. One whispered he was licking the trees. The other just stared blankly. They were both sent home the next day. The year after, a fire burned down cabin 2. Only one girl survived. She said a man with no face stood in the center of the room, watching as the flames spread. We reopened, but that story stayed buried. 3 years later, during my last summer there, I heard a camper scream in the middle of the night. I ran outside and saw it. Across the field, near the tree-line. Pale, hunched, unmoving. It stood just tall enough to seem human but wrong. Like it had never truly been alive. We searched the woods. Found nothing. That same night, one camper disappeared for 4 hours. When he came back, he had scratches on his cheeks and couldn't stop crying. He never said what happened. Just kept repeating, "He doesn't blink. He just listens." I never went back. They renamed the camp the next year. But to this day, old counselors warn each other, never follow the noises in the woods. Because Johnny doesn't like to be seen. I was 15 when I went to Pine Ridge Camp for the first, and only, time. It was supposed to be a month of fun. No phones, no internet, just good old summer bonding. But something was wrong with that place. And by the time I left, I'd seen things I still can't explain. The camp was buried deep in the Catskills, and the drive up was like a descent into another world. Trees arched over the road like they were trying to keep sunlight out. When we arrived, I noticed how dead the air felt. No birds. No bugs. Just this heavy, humid stillness. The campgrounds themselves looked normal enough, cabins arranged in a horseshoe, a mess hall, a lake, and a narrow trail that led into dense woods. My cabin was Pine 6. It creaked when you walked and had that old cedar smell, but I liked it. The first 3 days were uneventful. Typical camp stuff, archery, swimming, campfires. But I noticed that whenever we got close to the woods, counselors would subtly steer us away. "Let's stay in the meadow today," they'd say. "More space for activities." That struck me as odd. We were surrounded by forest. Why avoid it? On the 4th night, around 2:30 a.m., I woke up needing to pee. The bathroom was in a separate building, and I didn't want to wake anyone. So I grabbed a flashlight and slipped out. The air outside was colder than it should have been for July. As I walked past Pine 5, I heard whispering. Not voices. More like leaves rustling in a rhythm. I turned my light toward the trees. The beam caught something. Eyes. High up. Reflective like an animal's, but too far apart. I froze. The eyes blinked, and the shape moved, too fast, too smoothly. It vanished into the woods with a sound like dragging burlap. I sprinted to the bathroom, slammed the door, and stayed inside for nearly an hour. The next morning, I asked one of the counselors, Mark, about animals in the area. "Coyotes?" I asked. "Anything that climbs?" Mark gave me this look. Like he was measuring how much to say. "Just don't go into the woods at night," he said. Then he walked off. That evening, a kid named Tyler went missing. We were supposed to be watching a skit near the fire circle. He said he had to grab something from his cabin. Never came back. They searched the camp. Nothing. Then they expanded the search into the woods. Still nothing. Local police were called. Helicopters came. Dogs. The whole deal. But there was no trace. No footprints. No clothing. No scent trail. It was like he'd never been there at all. That night, our counselor locked the cabin door and said nobody was to leave, no matter what. Around 1 a.m., I heard tapping on the window. I was in the top bunk, and the window was on the other side of the cabin. I slowly leaned over to look. It was Tyler. His face was pressed to the glass. His eyes were open, wide and wet. But he wasn't blinking. Wasn't moving. Just there. I whispered to wake the others, but when they looked, he was gone. We ran outside with flashlights. Nothing but footprints. His bare feet. Leading back toward the woods. The next day, they told us Tyler had been picked up by his parents. But I knew what I saw. And I knew they were lying. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying his face in the window. Then, just past 3 a.m., I heard something under the cabin. Pine Ridge cabins are built on short stilts, about 3 feet off the ground. I heard scratching. Then thumping. Then a whisper. "Help me." I slid off the bunk and crept to the floorboards. There was a crack between 2 planks. I lowered my ear to it. The voice came again. They were our faces. Suddenly, a hand shot up through the floor crack. Filthy, long fingers. Nails like splinters. I screamed, and the hand withdrew instantly. Everyone woke. The counselor checked under the cabin with a flashlight but found nothing. The next day, I asked Mark directly. "What's in the woods?" He didn't answer right away. Just stared out at the tree line. Then he said, "It lives under us now. It's learning." On the 6th night, everything unraveled. We were all in the mess hall playing board games. It was storming hard outside. Thunder rattled the windows. Suddenly, all the lights cut out. The generator kicked in, and emergency lighting flickered on. A counselor named Jesse took roll call. 4 kids were missing. Then we heard it. A howl, not animal. Human. Coming from the woods. Then another. And another. All identical. Repeating like a recording. "Help me." Then the lights went out again. Screams. One of the emergency lights showed someone standing at the back of the hall. At first we thought it was one of the counselors. Until they moved. It was jerky. Like a puppet on strings. Its arms bent the wrong way. Its face didn't move. Just stared. Then it lunged. People scattered. I ran with a group to Pine 6 and barricaded the door. All night, we heard footsteps. Scratching. And voices. The next morning, half the camp was gone. Counselors. Kids. No one would talk about it. They packed us into vans and drove us back into town. Told us there was a gas leak. An evacuation. But I still have the scar. A deep one on my thigh where something grabbed me through the floorboards. I never told my parents. Never told anyone. Last year, someone from Pine Ridge emailed me. Just one line. "It remembers you." And attached was a photo. Of me. Asleep in bed. In my own house. Taken from the window. At 3:17 a.m. I don't know what came back with me. But sometimes, I hear it whispering beneath the floor. And every summer, I feel the pull to return.